Alright y'all, so today we're working on a gauge panel cluster for a 66 Pontiac Tempest, basically a GTO. And obviously the first step was to cut out the original dash piece, and I wanted to use this console because it all bolts in and it's just easier just to use the console and then modify the face. So the first thing to do with really any metal project is to make an accurate template. Now you can see I took some time to cut and radius all these edges and make it all so it's approximately a good fit. And you can see under here I have this tucked up. I'll show you. So I just roughly bent it, and you can see that it's going to bolt to the underside of this here, so it makes it a little fun. Now you can also see that I left as much of this as I could around this edge here, so I can also bolt it to this plastic edge here. Now you're not going to see any of this, so this doesn't really matter, but if you remember right in the last shot, it showed that there was gauges that came right here, so I couldn't actually leave the top with any lip, so I have to do it under here. So that's that. Now I have ground down all the stuff off of there that is in the way, and now I have an accurate template, so I can lay this out, straighten this out, and lay this out on a piece of steel or aluminum, and it'll be exactly to the size. I do the paper template method, or you can use cardboard, because it's a lot easier to cut and trim to fit with a pair of scissors than it is with your actual material and say a cut-off wheel or however you're cutting your material. And that is the biggest tip that I have for anybody. Now another thing that I did here was, this is tag board and it's only 26 inches wide I believe, and this is like 29 inches wide. So what I had to do was I started with one side, and I got this one side fit perfectly, and then I measured and traced this side and flipped it and just taped it onto this side. So you can see that it's a pretty good fit. So basically it's going to fit the same on this side. If anything, you want your template to be just a hair bit big, so you can slowly grind it away to fit it in nice. Now right here I used a 4-inch hole saw and just kind of traced around it. This was kind of tricky to get to line up, but I got it there. These are autometer gauges. Now this is a Cummins, so there's a couple things that we wanted. Here is the 2 5/8 diesel tach. Now this comes with an alternator signal sender, so it straps your alternator and then it senses based on the amount of times the alternator spins your RPM. Here's a pyrometer, so that's for EGTs, exhaust gas temperatures. Tells you if you're running too hot, too lean, whatever. Right here, basic oil pressure. This is water pressure. This one here is boost, 60 psi boost. And then here is the electric signal speedometer that is going to hook to the Getrag 4G manual transmission. So those are the part number, or those are the parts. The part numbers will be in the description. These are just what we use. Now, if you notice that the speedo and the tach are different size, so I have to lay this out all on my sheet there, how I want it, and then I'll use hole saws of the appropriate sizes. So as I mentioned, all I did now was I took and I flattened this out. I laid this out on my material, which I'm using as 18 gauge steel in this case. And then I used some magnets that I have sitting around to hold it in place. And then I just traced it with a Sharpie. And then I'll use hole saws of the appropriate sizes. So I have a 2-inch hole saw here. Now the gauge is 2 1/16, but that little 1/16 of an inch I'll just hog out with a little grinder. Right here is the 2 5/8 for the tach. Here's the 3 3/8 for the speedo, and then here's the 4-inch one that I used to lay out that paper template, just as a round tracing unit basically. Here you can see I have the panel with the edge and the bead roll, and it's all fit pretty good. So now I can actually lay out the gauges. So I already did this once to kind of figure out how I wanted to do it, but I'll show you anyways here. Now it'll be something like this. I'm just using the hole saws and these small gauge clusters or backers. So basically what I'm doing is setting this how I think it'd be visually pleasing. So I have these two gauges here. This is the speedo, this is the tack. I'll have them like this, and they're a bit lower. You notice this line here is a bit lower on the dash panel than that line there. So that will, in turn, these gauges will be centered with each other, but then these ones will be up and top and level with the top of this one. It just looks the best, so I do that. And now I'm taking these and I'm going to measure the spacing. Now an important thing to keep in mind is the faces of the gauges themselves have a ring around it, a bezel, which is going to be about 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch, depending on your gauge. So you got to take that into account and make sure you don't put them too close together to where they won't actually go in, because they'll hit on each other. So if I put all these here, like so, just kind of an example here. Try and get them all evenly spaced, obviously. Now this will leave room for some switches down under here, or I might even put a Tinman 2 custom sticker on here. And yeah, it'll look appropriate. Now another thing that I did that might be subtle, but can make a difference actually, is along the bottom side here is going to be riveted or screwed in, but along the top side there isn't going to be rivets between here and the edge like there would be here. So this is actually only a 3/4 of an inch gap, where this right here is 1 inch. Now why did I do that? Well, once you get a screw in there, this is going to look smaller. So it's just a little detail that more correct without I don't know, it's hard to explain. I think you guys can kind of follow what I'm saying. But that is that, and so now I can just lay these out, center punch the holes, and hole saw each hole out. And then the gauge panel will be ready to start actually mounting with screws or rivets or whatever. I got about maybe 4 hours into this so far. Yeah, something about 4 hours. So it's not a quick process, but it'll turn out good, so it's worth it. And again, this is just 18 gauge steel. So right now I got my hole saw set up. And another thing of importance to know is the RPM of your drill. A lot of drill presses have a few pulleys that you can adjust the RPMs with. Basically, you just move the belts. So some of them have charts in here, some of them don't. To your lowest speed, lube it up. If you're going too fast, you're just going to harden the steel and mess up your hole saw. There's different kinds of hole saws. There's actually like dimple die type deals that you can use that are a lot easier. So what they are, they're basically just a cutting surface here, and then you tighten them together and it cuts the hole for you, so you don't have to use a hole saw, which is good for sheet metal and for gauges, but I don't have all the sizes. But like I said, you can buy those sets. Mittler Bros makes a nice set. They're about $700, but they're well worth it if you're going to be doing a lot of gauges. You just drill your pilot hole and then bolt it up and it cuts the hole for you. So less lube, no bullshit. Anyways, now I'll set this and I can drill these holes out. So now you can see that I have the headlight switch and the ignition switch holes cut out. I used a 1-inch hole saw here and a just under 1/2 inch drill bit here, and I am laying out the rivets. You can see here I have some 1/8 inch clecos around the surroundings. Basically I measured out and placed them where I thought they need to be. I'm using an 1/8 inch drill bit, obviously. Now I have the last hole here, so what I did is I just laid them out on this sheet metal, drilled out the 1/8 inch holes on my drill press, pushed it in here, and now that it's all in here, I can just drill out the hole in the plastic behind the steel here. So now I have that hole drilled through. And if you're not familiar with clecos, I'll show you how they work real quick. So you have your hole, you have your cleco, push it in, stick it in the hole, then when you release it, it springs and clamps that together. Basically a temporary rivet. Now on the back side here, on this lip, I have the holes drilled in the steel, and then I just have to drill the holes in the plastic and cleco them, and then I can actually take this all apart, clean it up, paint it, and then final rivet it in, and it'll be done. Now all that's left is to wire up all the senders and hook all this up in the car. There's all the senders in these boxes here, and it'll be ready to rock and roll. I think it turned out pretty sweet. Speedo, tack, water temp, oil temp, EGTs, pyrometer, boost. Tinman 2 Kustoms.